Hello guys, thanks so much for watching. So this video is my birth story, my labor and delivery story. I don't know what I'm going to call it, but there have been so many requests for this video and I didn't even think there would be because I did a labor and delivery vlog. I will link it. I've done so many videos preparing for baby and videos with him, like everyday life videos. So yeah, check those out if you haven't seen them and you're interested. But a lot of you guys know that our birth did not go an ideal sort of way, and I hope I don't sound like I'm complaining in this video because I don't like to complain. I like to be positive, but I'm also just going to be like real and tell you how I actually feel about things and what actually happened. So I hope that you enjoy this video. Hit the like button if you do. Please consider subscribing to my channel if you're new here. I would love to have you. If I am looking at my phone a lot, I'm watching Forrest. He's taking his nap right now, so I'm sure he will make an appearance in this video. I will show him to you, but I hope you enjoy this and let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to start out from finding out I was being induced. And I talked about this in like a few videos, so I'm just going to touch on it really fast. But basically, I had a phone call from my doctor at 37 weeks and 1 day. And as soon as I answered the phone, I knew I was being induced because it was sort of a topic of conversation for a couple of weeks because the fluid levels were low, and the fluid is basically like the water. So when your water breaks, that's the fluid. And it was like on the verge of being low for a couple weeks, and then it finally went into the low range, but it was like at the top of the low range. So it wasn't super serious, but it definitely was something they had to like really watch and be cautious about. So I had an ultrasound for a fluid check on a Thursday. And she told me the fluid went down, but she didn't say anything else. She didn't seem super concerned about it. And I told you guys in another video, I said, so he's coming sooner than later, and she nodded her head, but she wouldn't say anything else. So I thought, okay, I'm probably induced. I probably am going to be induced in like a week, but I didn't think it would be the next day. So Friday, the day after the ultrasound, I had a phone call from my doctor, and I've had so many phone calls from the doctor's office to confirm appointments. It's always like someone from the front desk. So when I answered the phone and it was the actual doctor, I knew, like I just knew I'm having this baby. So she told me like the fluid went down, the same things I knew, but she said since I was 37 weeks, it wasn't like, how do I say this? The risks weren't going to outweigh the benefits kind of thing. Is that, I don't even know if I'm saying that in the right way, but it wasn't worth it to keep him in is what I'm trying to say. So she said she's going to call the hospital and I'm either going to go in that night, or if they're full, I'm going to go in the next night. So I was completely shocked, but honestly, I feel like that was the best case scenario for me because if I knew I was going to be induced that day, I like would not have slept for weeks. I would have been worrying about it. I would have been looking up things I shouldn't have been looking up. So the fact that I didn't have time for any of that, I feel like was the best case scenario for myself. And she called me around like 1:30 in the afternoon. She told me she's going to call me back, and she called me like 5 minutes later and then said I'm going in that night at 10:30. So I had like all afternoon to shower, get everything ready. A lot of you guys know like I was super prepared for him to come, and so I just got everything as ready as I could, and we went into the hospital that night at 10:30. And I was very pro pain management. I said exactly what I said as soon as we got there. I didn't even sit in the bed. I didn't even put on the gown. I said to the nurse, I want an epidural sooner than later. I don't have anything to prove to anybody. I don't want to be suffering and uncomfortable for a long time. When can I have it? As soon as I said that, I knew I couldn't just like have it in the very beginning, but I just wanted to make sure I wasn't like in agonizing pain when I got it. And she said, we're not gonna let you suffer. As soon as you want it. I had to be like a 2 or a 3 or something like that for an epidural, which was a lot sooner than I was even expecting. So I said, okay, that's great. We're on the same page. She knows like I want pain management sooner than later. So then my nurse left, and after she left, so many other people were coming in asking questions. I know there was someone for the epidural that was like asking family history questions. I wish I could remember what everyone was asking, but it's basically a lot of the same questions from different people that worked at the hospital. Obviously, I don't know why I felt like I needed to say that. So then after that, was probably like an hour in, I started Cervidil. I need water, sorry. And Cervidil, I think there's 2 forms of it. I think there's like a string form that they can pull out of you, and then there's a pill form, and I had the pill form. They showed me the pill. I was expecting like a larger pill. I don't know why. but it was like if you crushed up a pill and you took one tiny piece of it, it was like the size of half of a fingernail. It was the smallest thing ever that they put inside of you, and I did check to see if I had like progressed at all before they did anything. I hadn't. I was not even a 1. They did say I was fairly effaced. I don't even know what that means honestly, but I wasn't like a 1, 2, 3 anything. I was completely closed. So they put in the Cervidil. They told me they'd be back in a couple hours to check. I probably would have a second dose of Cervidil, and then if I hadn't progressed by the morning, I could take a break and have breakfast if I wanted to, because that would be the last opportunity for me to eat. I didn't eat anything when I got there or for the whole night. So they came back a few hours later, nothing had happened. They gave me a second dose of Cervidil around like 3:30 or 4 in the morning. And then around 7:30 or 8, they came in again to check me, and I still hadn't progressed, which they told me was completely normal for a first-time mom. They actually told me I probably wouldn't have him until Sunday. And again, I got there Friday night, but I knew he was coming on Saturday. Like I knew it. So I asked to have breakfast. It took like an hour for them to tell me I could have breakfast. Let me just look at him because he's sleeping so good. I feel like I'm way too lucky right now. And I don't know why this was. Our hospital had room service, of course. That was like terrible food though, and it took forever. And then there was, it's not a food court, it's like a cafeteria, I guess. That was actually like really nice food and tons of options. So the nurse told me I could have room service, and I was not expecting it to take like an hour and 45 minutes, but it literally took that long. So I don't know how this even happened, but I hadn't had any Cervidil since the middle of the night. The nurse had already said it wasn't working and they probably would go to Pitocin after I had breakfast. And right as soon as the breakfast came, or actually no, it was like 15 minutes before the breakfast came, I'm like sitting there starving, and I start feeling the contractions and cramps. And I called in the nurse and just said, like, I think something's happening. And she was nice about it, but she thought I was like a little bit overreacting. She didn't think anything was happening because again, I hadn't had Cervidil in so many hours. They already said like, it's not happening for you right now. So it was very weird that so many hours later it started to kick in. And then like 15 minutes later, I called her in again, and this is when the food was arriving, because I was definitely in some pain. I was definitely uncomfortable. I wasn't having like regular conversations. It was seriously like a light went off, and I went from feeling nothing to feeling significantly uncomfortable. And from here, it did not stop, because if you are having contractions the natural way, like it just starts on its own. It comes in waves, but if you're having contractions that were forced upon you, like in a medical way, it's not the same. They are harder contractions, they're stronger contractions, and they don't really stop. So I honestly, from as soon as the contractions started to having him, I never had a break. Like, of course I had the waves of contractions, but I didn't have a couple minutes in between contractions by any means. It literally was just like constant. And so then like 15 minutes after that, sorry for my nurse, but I called her in so many times because things were progressing so quickly. So like 15 minutes after that, probably the third time within an hour, I called her in again. I said, I think my water broke. It's like a trickle. And she's like, oh, I think you're peeing. She didn't even see anything. She didn't like pick up the blanket or anything like that. But she's like, oh, it's probably just pee. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And I said, no, because I can feel, if I want to pee right now, I can feel that like I can push that out, but I can't stop this. I'm trying to stop it. And she was like, oh, I'm sure it's fine. And then 15 minutes after that, I called her in again and said, it's significant. It's like pouring out of me. So she's like, okay, it's probably your water. Things are probably happening. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, it was kind of chaotic. The food came and I had like 1 or 2 bites of food. That was it, because it took so long and I was so uncomfortable. I couldn't even eat anymore. And in the labor and delivery vlog, I had some gum in my mouth. I was like really chewing hard on gum because I had like a few bites of a ham and cheese omelet, and I was like, I do not want to smell like a ham and cheese omelet for the next several hours until this baby's born. But also, this is so strange. I honestly feel like so much of having a baby, you really don't understand until you're in the situation, because for me at least, that's how it was. Like, so many people would say things about having a baby and I was like, okay, that's not true, that won't happen to me. it does. This is where like the animalistic type instincts started to kick in. As soon as I was uncomfortable, I just felt like I had to bite down. I don't know why, but I had that intense feeling until he was born. So I had a lot of gum in my mouth. I was like biting really, really hard on gum. And then once I was very uncomfortable, I had a towel in my mouth literally for hours, and I was biting down on a towel. I don't know why, but I just had to bite on something. And so as soon as I was pretty uncomfortable, again, it happened like really fast. I said I need something for pain. So they gave me, I know I'm not saying this right, but I'm sure a lot of you could figure it out or like write in the comments. I want to say Stratadol. It starts with an S for sure, like an ST something. It's also an IV medication. And she told me like it isn't so much for pain, but it's going to make you feel like you had a few drinks, like a few glasses of wine, and it's going to make you feel like you don't really care as much about the pain. I feel like this is pointless, okay? Because I was completely there in my head, but I knew I couldn't get it out. Like I felt like I was thinking and I was in the moment 100% in my head, but it was coming out at like 50 or 60%. And I asked Chad like how I was acting, and he said I seemed like I was drunk, but I knew, like I was very aware. I just wasn't showing that I was aware. And I feel like it's to make you fuzzy when you remember things. So I don't know, I feel like it's a very strange thing because it really didn't do anything for me. It seemed like it was, but in the moment and even when I'm remembering things, I knew that it did not help at all with pain, but it just sort of makes what you're remembering fuzzy. So that stuff I feel like is pointless. And then probably like 30 to 45 after this, I asked for an epidural. They checked me, and they had checked me a few times since I got there. It wasn't ever painful until now. And this is when I was a 3. So it was extremely painful when they checked me. And I would say the first few times it was just a lot of pressure. That was it, but there wasn't any discomfort. And when they checked me this time, I was like making noises. I wasn't pushing them away, but I wanted to. They could tell I was like extremely uncomfortable. So they said, okay, we're going to call for an epidural. Again, I was like a 3 to 4 at this point. And so after like 45 minutes at least, I asked like, is the epidural coming? Am I in line for it? What's the situation? What's going on with it? And she said, it's coming, it's coming. He's really busy right now. I'm backtracking, but when I first said, as soon as I got there, I want an epidural sooner than later, I said, how long is it going to take? When should I ask for it? And I said, I just don't want to ask for it and it take a couple of hours. So she said, as soon as you feel like it's going to be 45 minutes until you need it, that's when you should ask for it. It probably will only take 15 minutes. This is literally what I was told. I was told it probably won't take any more than 15 minutes, but if you want to be really cautious, then ask for it 45 minutes to an hour before you really, really want it. So that's exactly what I did. And so again, it had been like 45 minutes, it hadn't come yet, so I asked, what's going on, is it coming? They told me it's coming, and then 15 minutes later, they said, oh, we have to do a lab on you before you can have an epidural. And I had like occasional hypertension, which is high blood pressure, so I think that's why they wanted to do it, but they weren't aware of this, I guess, until an hour after I asked for the epidural. So then I had to wait for the lab to come, and that took a while, and then I had to wait for the results to come back, and that took a while. So it literally took like 2.5 hours from when I asked for an epidural for me to actually have an epidural. I'm not exaggerating. I was screaming literally for like 2 hours. I was in such unbearable pain because again, the contractions are stronger when they are not a natural contraction. You don't get breaks. Like I can't even tell you. It was a torturous experience. I don't want to sound like I'm being so dramatic, but like it was not fun, okay? And of course I'm like biting on towels. Oh, and then I had to pee, but I didn't feel like I could walk. This is like a TMI thing, but I don't care. This is why you're watching this video. I had my husband keep bringing me bath towels so I could pee, and then once it was like almost full, he would put it in the laundry and bring me another one because I didn't want to pee like all over the bed and have them have to switch all of that out. I was so uncomfortable. I didn't want someone touching me if they didn't have to. You guys, I can't even explain to you how stressful and scary it is when you're in so much pain and you keep saying like, when is my relief coming? And they keep telling you it's coming, but it's literally been hours. So finally He comes in 2.5 hours later, and I am not the kind of person that cries very often. I am not the kind of person that shows like extreme emotion very often, but I did not care who was in that room, who was watching me, who was there. I was just a mess. And so he finally comes in and he's running in and he's like, sorry it took so long, I've been really busy. And he has something for me to sign. And he's like, I can read this off to you, I can tell you the risks. And I said, I don't care what happens to me. I pulled the sheet out of his hand, I signed it, I handed it back to him, and I was like, let's do this, let's go. At this point, I just had I was not thinking logically by any means because I had been through it. And I was actually told I probably was ready to push or almost ready to push when the epidural finally came. I wouldn't even let them see how far along I was and check me to see how far I was dilated because I couldn't take the pain anymore. I know I keep saying the same thing over and over again, but agonizing pain for 2.5 hours, okay? So I was not about to let anyone touch me except for pain relief. A lot of people say to you, like, you won't care how bad the epidural hurts because the contractions are worse. That is true. I did not care about anything except whatever was going to give me pain relief. It feels like a warm stinging sensation, like a burning sensation when it goes in your back, but it isn't unbearable. At first it only worked on one side. So I instantly felt it on the left side, but I didn't feel it on the right side. And he asked me, like, what are you feeling? Tell me what you're feeling. I said, I feel like a stinging, almost like a vibrating sensation on my whole left side. It's running through my leg, but I don't feel anything on my right side. So he was like, okay, I'm going to adjust it. He did that. He said, it's ready to go. It's perfect. It's good. And for the next 30 minutes, I still was screaming and I kept saying, like, when is this gonna work? They told me as soon as you put it in, it's going to take 15 minutes. So obviously by 30 minutes, I'm still freaking out. They know it's not working. They call him back. It takes him like another 15 minutes to get there. I don't know what he does, but he does something and fixes it so it also is on the right side because I was laying down still screaming because of the right side just having intense pain. But again, the left side was numb. So after he fixed it, he added a lot more into it, or like he turned it up. And then I finally was extremely numb, which is what I wanted in the first place. I wanted to be a little more numb than I thought I needed because I was so afraid of it wearing off. And at this point, I was ready to push. I think they gave me like 30 minutes to kind of sit down and compose myself. Well, I was sitting, but to compose myself and rest because of how long I had been going through it. And I pushed for, I'm gonna go in there and check on him. Really? Okay, sorry, he's good. But I pushed for an hour, a little less than an hour. It was only 3 or 4 pushes. They did give me Pitocin for pushing too because I had really consistent contractions for hours. And then as soon as I was a 10 and ready to push, they slowed down. So that's why I had to have some Pitocin. I don't know how much. They said it was a very small amount. And I was really nervous about pushing because I was so numb. But I like really focused, and they were very surprised at how well I was pushing and how much was happening with each push. So 3 or 4 pushes and he came out, and I didn't know this for a couple of days. Chad told me the cord was actually wrapped around his neck, and as soon as his head came out, one of the doctors put her finger right in between the cord and his neck so it wasn't like really tight on his neck. And no one said that to me. If Chad wouldn't have said that to me, I would have never known that. So I thought that was really weird. I'm sure I'm skipping over so many things. I didn't feel him come out as far as pain goes. The only thing I felt was like this huge sense of relief, I guess, of weight. I felt like I had lost a lot of weight in an instant. It just felt like something fell out of me is the only way I can describe it. I feel like I'm skipping over stuff. I'm trying to make sure I'm not forgetting anything, but I really do have like a foggy memory from it. I don't know if it's from all of the, I'm sure it's from a lot of the medicine. I also feel like your body is in fight or flight mode and it's making you forget things because it is such like an intense experience. I'm just so glad I wasn't pushing for several hours. And as soon as he came out, his breathing was a little bit strange. I had no idea what was going on because they were sewing me up and I saw some blood on their hands, and I stopped looking after that and paying attention because I did not want to see like scissors and all of that down there. But I did have a 2nd-degree tear. I'm trying to even remember. I had a 1st-degree tear, a 2nd-degree tear, or I think I had 2 2nd-degree tears. I don't know. I only have 3 stitches. I know that for sure. I have 2 in one spot, 1 in another spot, and then 1 tear. It wasn't significant enough for stitches. So it really wasn't that bad. I honestly thought I would tear a lot. I don't know why, just being a first-time mom, but I was fairly fine in that department. But Forrest had some trouble breathing, so they put a CPAP on him. They called in the NICU nurses. I really didn't understand what was going on at this point. I think from all the medicine and from the experience overall, I was very like confused. So he ended up having to go to the NICU, and he was there for a day and a half, which seriously was the worst. I just wasn't expecting this. Like, who expects that to happen? So he had like a breathing thing on to help get the fluid out of his lungs, and they basically told me that all babies have some fluid in their lungs when they're born. Some babies will need help getting it out. Some babies can do it on their own in the first few minutes of life. He needed help getting it out. They put him on my chest for a couple seconds, probably like 30 to 60 seconds, and then they took him away, and Chad went with him. And it was so strange because the whole room went from having like 15 or 20 people in it. I don't know if it's actually that many. I would say like 15 people. I would say 10 to 15 people to no one. And I was there alone. It was very strange. For, I would say, about 20 minutes I was alone after that. When they took Forrest, all the nurses went with him. Everyone, once I was sewed up, left. And then I had a nurse come back, and she put a pump on me and wanted me to pump. And an hour, and then she gave me like a sponge bath and wiped me off everywhere, and then she put me in a wheelchair and took me to go see Forrest. I just didn't understand like what was going on. I was in such shock that he wasn't right next to me. He had all of these things coming off of him, like sticky things on his chest, one right here, a heart thing on his foot, the thing on his face, an IV, a thing on his finger, just like so many things coming off of him. They gave him to me to hold him. Obviously, I was a mess at that point. Sorry it stopped recording because I've been talking so long. So he was there for a day and a half, but within the first 10 to 12 hours, they told me he didn't even really need to be there. They just had to slowly wean him off of everything. And so every hour they would turn things down, and he did great. Like from there on out, he really didn't have any problems from there, but we had to wait so long for him to get out of there. We were in the NICU with him as much as they would allow us to be. He had his own room, which was really nice. I would say every 5 to 6 hours they made me go back to my room, which was so far away, for a vitals check, to check the blood pressure, to push on my stomach, like all of those things. I think they were supposed to every 3 hours, but I wasn't there, so finally someone would come down and tell me like, you have to go back to your room, and that's when I would get like a Tylenol and a Motrin. But I wasn't even having as much medication for pain as I should have had because I wasn't in my room to have it. So we were with him as much as we could be until he finally was out of there, and then after a day and a half he was out of there, so we went back to our room with him. Super late at night, it was like 11:45 at night. I was looking forward to getting a little bit of sleep at this point, but our room was right outside of the nurse's desk, and there were so many nurses that were absolute angels, like literally such good people. A lot of the photos that we have are from our nurse who took our phones and was taking photos. We didn't even ask her to do that. She just did that, which is amazing. I'm so thankful for that. But at this point, we had a nurse who, I wish we had someone else, because he came back and she was in such a rush to do all these things to him, and she cut off his band from the NICU, and she was like, oh my gosh, I cut so fast, I almost cut him. And we were like, what? Like, you almost cut him? She was in a hurry and she was not very careful with him, and it was a shock to see compared to everybody else being so careful and taking their time with him. So that was a little bit stressful, and then she left and we had him alone. And all night, we had the nurses station right outside our door. They were laughing and very, very loud. And I just thought to myself, like, I'm a very understanding person. I'm like, oh, something happened, it's funny. In a few minutes, okay, this time the camera battery died. Are we back? So they were very, very loud at the nurses station, literally all night. I did not sleep at all, a single second, because right outside my door, it was like 6 to 10 people laughing and yelling the entire night. So by morning, I was just like done, because I had not slept in a couple days and I really, really needed some rest, and I was not getting it. And I was pumping, by the way, since he was born, like every other hour, every 2 to 3 hours. Nothing was coming out at all. Every once in a while I'd have like a drop of colostrum, and that was it. So I was nursing him a lot and nothing was happening, and I was worried about him not having enough food, but they kept telling me like, 1 to 3 days old, they barely need anything. They need a few drops because of course their stomach is super tiny, like the size of a cherry or smaller, and it's rapidly growing, but the first few days, like, they don't really need anything. So we were stressed out and asking for help from our nurse, our night nurse, who is the one that almost cut him. And she kept saying like, oh, you're doing great. And I was asking specific questions like, what should I do in this situation, that situation? And she would come in and say like, oh, everything's fine and you're doing great. And then she would leave. So we didn't get any help from her. And we were waiting for the morning nurse, who was an angel, very, very helpful. We asked for a lactation consultant. I recommend everybody ask for a lactation consultant because she was extremely helpful. And they just kept saying like, the milk's going to come in, it takes a few days for everybody, or especially if you're a first-time mom, it takes a few days, and he's totally fine. He doesn't seem like he needs anything at all right now, but we did end up asking for formula, and we gave him just a little bit of formula. I'm not the kind of person who's going to feel bad and beat myself up about that. If I feel like he's hungry and I feel like he needs something and I don't have any milk yet, I am totally fine at feeding him a little bit of formula. So he did have a small amount, and then the next day, or I think that day we left, we were there for 3 nights. So the first night I was being induced, the second night he was in the NICU, the third night he was with us. Yeah, so I left at the end of this day around like 4 p.m. And all day there were just so many like helpful people, helpful nurses, doctors coming in, making sure we had everything we need, answering all of our questions, making sure he was okay, I was okay. They did say that my stomach went down really, really fast, and pushing on my stomach, it wasn't painful, it was definitely uncomfortable, like the pressure thing. It felt like a lot of pressure, obviously, when they're pushing on your stomach every couple hours after the baby's born until you leave, but it wasn't like a pain by any means. And they kept saying, like, every time someone came in, they kept saying that my stomach had gone down extremely fast. They weren't worried about anything. And then I didn't really have swelling. The postpartum has been a lot easier than I thought it would be, and the labor and delivery was a lot harder than I thought it would be. So I'm really glad I at least had a break on one end, but again, I know I'm probably forgetting so much stuff. I do feel like I forgot so much of it since it was such an experience, and I'm so glad to be out of the hospital. I'm glad that he was out of the hospital because at first they told us he could be in the NICU for 6 hours or he could be there for 6 days. They had to see how things went to tell us any more than that. So at first I'm thinking like, I am not leaving this hospital without this baby. I was not about to go home without him. I know a lot of people have to do that, and I cannot even imagine. So that is essentially my labor and delivery story. I hope that I answered a lot of what you guys wanted to know. I tried to. I'm going to go get him if you haven't watched a lot of recent videos and you haven't seen him. Okay, I'm gonna show him to you quick because it's bright. I don't want to bother him. He's just in a diaper because he spit up after his last feed and then he fell asleep, so I didn't want to bother him to put on an outfit. But this is Forrest William. He is 3.5 weeks old. And he is almost 8 pounds of perfection. So that is our labor and delivery story. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and please hit the like button if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you're new, and I will see you right here in a few days in a brand new video. Bye!